Welcome to Echoes of My Imagination. My name is Tracy Lee. Sit back, relax. Let me tell you a story. Tonight's telling is not of one story, but several. Old Bardic threads gather together, the way fires are banked for the night. The stories are meant to wash over you, to give your mind something beautiful to rest against. This is a compilation for listening, for resting, for remembering how it feels to be held by voice. Let's get into it. The Star Forged. He was not born on Earth. Let's get into it. His first breath was drawn in low-gravity silence, inside a rotating habitat orbiting a dying star. His eyes opened to a world of metal, glass, and light, filtered through gold-tinted domes. His name was not a name, but a designation. Juno 3XR. But his mother called him Solon. She was an engineer biologist, one of the last terraformers of the original seeding ships. His father was gone, presumed vaporized in the shielding collapse that occurred before Solon's conception. His birth was a rebellion. No child had been born in that orbit for 11 years. The councils forbade it. But Solon was born anyway. His mother carved a tiny sun into his ankle with a laser etcher, not to mark him, to remind him. "You are made of light," she told him, "even if the stars forget." Solon's childhood was unlike any past life he'd lived. He floated before he walked. He built magnetic puzzles in zero-G and practiced maneuvering through maintenance shaft like an eel. He memorized ship schematics before he learned to read poetry. His world had only 17 humans. The rest were AI-run systems and semi-sentient plant life designated to monitor station biosphere output. But Solon was different. He talked to the station, not with the station, to it. And it answered, not in words, in pulses. Through blinking lights, warmth in certain corridors, cooling breezes that carried his name. At 11 cycles, he began dreaming of planetary surfaces he had never visited. Green forests breathing in tandem, desert towers humming ancient resonance, oceans that sang. He asked the station to show him where they were. It showed him nothing. And so he began drawing them. Hundreds of sketches, then models, then coded renderings. His mother once found him building a spiral-shaped pulse engine with blueprints he claimed he had remembered from a place with crystal runes and skyroot pillars. He had never left orbit. At 17, a breach occurred. The station suffered a destabilization in the central core. Systems flickered. Memory logs warped. The artificial gravity began to stutter. Solon walked into the center of the machine, sat beneath the emergency relay node, and began to hum. No one taught him the song. It was a low spiral pattern, a hum that mirrored harmonic frequencies used by energy-structured AI 3 generations prior. The breach sealed. The ship quieted. His mother watched with tears in her eyes. She whispered, "You're not just human, are you?" He didn't answer. The council came. Not physically. Through encoded light pulses and neural link messages, they summoned him to transfer, to serve, to descend. He refused. He said, "I am not meant to follow a dying code. I am meant to remember a living one." The council silenced communications. Solon opened the observatory dome. He sat under starlight that had traveled 10,000 years. He began to speak aloud to the constellations. "I know you. I know where you lead. I know the spiral is not a theory. It's a gate." That night, he vanished. No airlock breached. No transport left the dock. He was just gone. Days later, they found an engraving on the inside of the spiral drive hatch. A star is the only memory of light reaching itself again. The Seer Who Forgot. He was born during a meteor storm, the sky streaked with burning omens. Let's get into it. In a temple fortress carved into the cliffs of a red canyon, his birth was not awaited, it was foretold. The monks called him Viren, meaning he who sees the path beneath the path. The midwife whispered to the head scribe, he did not blink when he arrived. They marked his forehead with ink made from moonroot and obsidian, a spiral with an open center. His first cries were not of pain, but timing. Each wail echoed with deliberate rhythm, a beat that matched the vibration of a dormant gong. The monks took it as a sign. Viren's early life was shaped by prophecy. He was not raised by parents, but by a council of vision keepers. Each taught him a different language of perception. Master Jaleth taught him dream tracking. Sister Venya guided his inner ear to the song of stone. Archivist Poe drilled numbers into his breath, 1 number per inhalation, 1 per exhale, until he could count backward from 10,000 in perfect silence. He rarely played, but he did watch. He watched the birds wheel in uneven spirals. He watched water freeze in patterns others missed. He watched people before they spoke, and could guess their words by the tension in their jaws. By age 9, Viren no longer guessed. He knew. At 12, his first true vision struck. A fever overtook him during a fire rite. He collapsed mid-chant, clutching the floor, whispering names no one recognized. For 3 days he drifted. When he awoke, he named 3 acolytes who would leave the order within the year. All 3 did. 1 became a soldier, 1 a wanderer, 1 vanished entirely. After that, the monks built him his own chamber, not out of reverence, out of fear. He was visited not with dreams, but certainty, and certainty is a dangerous weight. He became quiet, then restless. People treated him like a symbol, not a soul. They came to him for answers, not conversation. What will my daughter grow to be? Is my brother alive across the desert? Will this sickness kill me? He answered, and his answers were always right, until the day he lied. She came to him in the spring when the canyon winds carried the scent of almond blossoms. Her name was Mirren, a traveler, a trader. Her eyes were not clouded with questions. They held stories. She brought him a carved flute and sat beside him without speaking. Every day for a week she returned. She played music. She drew spirals in dust. She told him of places he had only seen in visions. Forests with violet leaves. Rivers that sang in chords. On the 8th day she asked, "Do you see our future?" He hesitated. He saw her death in fire, in exile, alone. But he said, "No, I do not see it." They became inseparable. They read old prophecies by torchlight. They explored wind caves and meditated in thermal pools. She taught him the names of stars the monks had no names for. He laughed with her. He wept with her. He kissed her in a canyon bloom field. He asked her to stay. She said yes. And for the first time in his life, he wanted to forget. But visions do not fade. One night during a lunar eclipse, the fire returned. He saw her walking into a trap. He saw the tortures, the accusation, the pain. He tried to stop her. He begged her not to leave that morning. but gave no reason. She smiled. I trust you, but I trust my path too. Left. By nightfall, she was gone. The monks found him sitting beneath the stars, eyes blank, mouth whispering one single word. No. He did not speak again, not for years. He burned his visions, refused his sight. He wandered the desert, ate only what birds brought him, slept in silence, and slowly he began to forget. It was in the forgetting that he began to heal. In forgetting the timelines, he found presence. In forgetting certainty, he found wonder. When he finally returned to the temple, gray-haired and soft-eyed, he carried a book of blank pages. This, he said, breaking decades of silence, is the only prophecy that matters. He handed it to a child. Fill it with your own fire. He died peacefully, a smile on his lips, gazing at the almond blossoms. In the wind, a faint melody played, a carved flute, echoing from nowhere. The Keeper of Ashes. The world was already ending when she was born, not in fire or thunder, but in the slow, suffocating silence of decay. Let's get into it. The old cities had fallen decades before, consumed not by war, but by erosion of truth, of meaning, of memory. Skies dimmed, oceans withdrew. Machines hummed without purpose, flickering in their own forgetting. She was born in a crater garden where no flowers bloomed. Her mother was a scavenger, her father never known. The girl came into the world as the third sun dimmed. The midnight called her Ashlyn, for her hair was the color of dust, and her breath so soft it stirred cinders. She did not cry. There were no lullabies, only the wind howling through broken glass. Ashlyn grew in the bones of the old world. Her cradle was a rusted gear. Her first toys were fragments of data cores, etched in languages no one remembered. She slept curled in old biosuits and learned to track movement by the way silence shifted. By age 6, she could strip a fusion core blindfolded. By 8, she had mapped the entire ruin grid of Sector Delta 3. She did not speak for the first 10 years of her life. Words, her mother said, were fuel. You don't waste them. You burn them only when needed. Her adolescence was marked by the first collapse. The last sky ring, an orbiting archive of lost civilizations, fell to earth in a cascade of fire. It blackened the horizon for 72 days. When the ash finally settled, the people changed. Some went mad. Others began to vanish, not die, just evaporate, as if they were never written into this version of reality. Ashlyn remained. She buried the bones, burned the rest. In the ruins of a collapsed observatory, she built her home. At 16, she discovered the Vault of Embers. Deep beneath the ice-glass lake, hidden by a cloak of particle shallow, it pulsed with dim orange light. Inside were relics, memory spheres, genetic seeds, fragments of flame, literal flame contained in crystal. She began to collect, not for power, for preservation. One by one, she learned the names of the extinct. She stitched histories into fiber threads. She built a library from bones, metal, and memory. She became the keeper. In her 3rd decade, a child arrived. No one knew from where. He walked barefoot through acid rain untouched. His eyes were opal white. His voice carried frequencies that triggered ancient machines. He called her mother. She did not correct him. Together they rebuilt languages. He spoke them. She etched them into stone. He saw futures. She made them into maps. But entropy has no favorites. On the 47th solar cycle of her adult life, the black pulse came. It erased not matter, but structure. Machines failed. Memory spheres shattered. Words unbound themselves from meaning. The child began to fade. Not physically, historically. He turned to her with eyes of fractal light and whispered, "Preserve the flame, even if the story dies." And then he was gone. Ashlyn did not scream. She did not mourn. She recorded. Into the last crystal she spoke every name she knew, every story, every mistake. She sealed it in the vault and walked into the wind. When her body failed, it did not decay. It became ash. But her voice became a resonance, a faint pulse in the broken data streams, a low tone beneath the soil. And those who listen closely can still hear it, a whisper saying, "Remember, rebuild, reignite." The Sandglass Keeper, where the winds whispered across inverted dunes, and time spilled like breath across a mirror. One soul stood sentinel at the axis of remembrance. Let's get into it. Valemere was not known by compass or chart. It lay curled within the folds of an old mountain's forgotten sleep, where wind carved glyphs into stone and stars rose out of the ground. Time there drifted. People walked backward into tomorrow and forward into yesterday. Some children were born wrinkled and grew into youth. Others died before their parents were conceived. The moon might rise twice, or not at all. And in the center, atop a pillar of petrified root, stood the sandglass. It had no top, no bottom, only flowing strands of golden dust that spun slowly in both directions. Watching over it was the keeper. She was not born. She arrived. No one saw her appear. One day, she stood barefoot on the root pillar, hair tangled with wind, eyes the color of setting suns. The people of Valemere did not question. They knew time had chosen her. She never left the root, not to sleep, not even to eat. And yet, she did not fade. Instead, she watched the sand, not to control it, but to hear what it whispered. The sand sang. It didn't sound like music, but it moved in rhythm. Swirls of joy when a love was fulfilled. A sudden backward spill when someone spoke a lie. Clockwise spirals when a soul remembered its purpose. Stillness when something sacred was at risk. She read it as one might read braille in the wind. And when the strands nodded, when futures twisted, or an echo threatened to collapse, she placed her fingers gently into the flow and sang. Not a command, a remembering. Her voice was like time made tender. People came to the pillar at dawn and dusk, not to ask questions, but to witness the sand. They laid offerings around the root, forgotten names, broken watches, feathers from dreams. They listened to the keeper's hum and interpreted her cadence like scripture. A farmer sowed early that year because the keeper's hum fell into a minor key. A mother kept her daughter home from the river when the sand reversed slightly in a windless day. An elder passed peacefully after the keeper blinked once, eyes glistening, when his name passed the sand. She never spoke aloud, but her presence spoke louder than thunder. One twilight, the sand froze, not paused, locked. The winds held still, children stopped mid-run. The stars above blinked out as if inhaling. From the edge of the valley a shadow emerged, not a being, but a rip. A temporal wound, Something had gone wrong far away in another lifetime, but its echo reached Valemere. The keeper stepped from the root for the first time. She raised both hands, palms outward, and began to hum. Not in tone, but in chords, layers, histories. Even the river hummed. The sand began to tremble, then swirl, then weep forward again gently, with great care. The rip sealed, and time exhaled. When dawn rose the next morning, the keeper was gone. In her place, a single strand of golden sand, suspended in air, humming faintly. No one touched it. The root was left empty. But from that day forward, the people of Valemere began to carry their own small sandglasses, woven from the bone glass and hair thread, not to control time, but to remember it kindly. And somewhere, across some wind-blown ridge, a girl with sunset eyes now walks backwards into tomorrow, listening to the hush between seconds. The moonbinder of the tide-lit shoals. Along the curling edge of the world, where the waves whispered names into the cliffs and the wind smelled of silver, a child was born as 3 moons crossed paths in the sky. Let's get into it. The villagers called her Kayla, but the sea had other names for her, names spoken in the tide and tremor. She was born with a silver cord wrapped around her wrist, soft as kelp and cold as moonlight. Her mother said she did not cry when she was born. She hummed. The midwives never argued. Kayla grew up in a salt-battered cottage nestled between coral thickets and moon pools that glowed faintly blue at night. The tide shifted when she approached. Crabs laid offerings of shell fragments near her feet. Her first word was not spoken, but signed into water. By the age of 5, she could bind things, loose things, wild things, forgotten things. She tied her father's dreams to a net so he would no longer forget her name. She wove grief into a braid and hung it in the rafters. And when a sailor broke her sister's heart, Kayla whispered to the wind, and the sea refused him passage for 7 years. But her deepest magic was drawn from the moons. Each month, as the 3 lunar bodies waxed and waned, Kayla stepped barefoot into the tide pools and sang. With silver thread dipped in seawater, she performed bindings, rituals that could tether soul to soul, oath to truth, promise to purpose. These bindings were not simple knots. They shimmered like jellyfish and only dissolved with salt tears. She could bind a lie to silence, or a mother to her lost child across the veil. She bound storm spirits to coral. She bound loneliness to driftwood and set it adrift, never to return. Her rites were beautiful, but never free. Each binding took from her. Skin would peel, eyes would blur, and her voice would tremble from each passing moon. Still she served. They called her the moonbinder, the tide keeper, the salt priestess. One day, a woman arrived from the northern fords, scarred by spirit loss, unable to cry, hollow behind the eyes. Kayla took her hand, and with a thread of moon-woven kelp, she wove her soul back into the living. The two fell into rhythm. They swam at dusk, mended nets at dawn, and bound one another with laughter stronger than any spell. The villagers said Kayla had finally tethered herself. They were wrong. When the tide came, when the sea grew restless and the old gods stirred, Kayla stood alone on the black rocks. She performed one final binding. She tied the realm of water to the realm of stars, and her own name to the silence of waves. Then, with grace, She walked into the tide and became mist. To this day, when the third moon is full, if you place your feet in the tide and close your eyes, you may feel the tug of something gentle around your wrist, a silver thread. The Smokebound Oracle. Born beneath the scorched heavens of the Red Spired Mountains, the child arrived in a bath of molten light. Her newborn arms shimmered with faint glowing runes that pulsed like coals. Let's get into it. They named her Solenia, though the fire itself had given her a name no tongue could hold. She was raised in a cliffside temple built into the throat of an ancient volcano. The temple priests were flame-bound, worshippers of the old heat, but none of them had ever seen a child breathe in fire and exhale memory. Solenia's gift emerged early. She would hold a coal in her palm, and instead of burning, it would show her things. The face of a long-dead elder, the final words of a soldier, a forgotten love buried in smoke. They called her the Oracle, not because she saw the future, but because she carried the full weight of the past. Each ember was a soul fragment, each flame a doorway. In adolescence, she walked barefoot through firewalk corridors. The ashes whispered names to her. She learned to trace sigils in smoke, to summon truth from charred bone, to speak with the dying flame of those not quite gone. But the gift came with cost. With every vision, her skin burned anew, not with pain, but with remembrance. The body healed, but her heart grew heavy. The memories she held were not hers, yet they lived inside her, weeping and laughing and aching. She fell in love once with a glassmaker named Tren, who carved beauty from heat. He made her a mask from volcanic glass, not to hide her, but to honor her many lives. She wore it only once, during the rite of reckoning, where she called forth the soul of a king who had started a war. The king wept. Tren did too. Solenia's final rite was not of flame, but of smoke. She walked into the heart of the mountain during its long sleep and lay down in the cradle of ash. She sang a song none had heard but all remembered. The mountain pulsed once and grew silent. She was gone. Yet every time the volcano smokes, villagers leave a coal near their door. In dreams she returns not to predict, but to remind. The fire remembers, and so does she. And that's it for today. Thank you for joining me for Echoes of My Imagination. My name is Tracy Lee. Don't forget to subscribe, share, follow, and like. And I'll catch you next time.